Hello everyone. Hello everyone. My name is Shahid Mohammed, Mr. Shahid Mohammed, and I am going to do a an overview of this research poster presentation on behalf of the RPSG and KDAR's social media platforms. That's the Renal Patient Support Group, RPSG, and the Kidney Disease and Renal Support Group, or KDAR's Group for Kids social media platforms. And this is a research poster presentation for UKKW 2026. That's for UK Kidney Week 2026. And the original works in around this have been a collaborative effort between some undergrad and postgrad students at two academic institutions in the United Kingdom, and additionally colleagues and collaborators, colleagues and collaborators involved works in around works with the in and between the two social media platforms, the RPSG and KDAR's Group for Kids social media platform. So this research poster presentation is a sort of a look at coping and chronic illness in young people, and looking at this from the construct of from the construct of immunology, in construct of the of immunology and neurobiology. Some of this some just to inform that some of the some elements of the research poster presentation may be familiar with some of the works that have been iterated through the social media platforms sort of retrospectively. So a little bit of intro in around this. So in young people, coping is inherently connected with age-related factors playing an important role in adaptation processes to stress triggers. For example, investigations have surrounded coping. Some investigations surrounding coping and young people have been found to be unique and challenging, because young people have sort of deviating perspective and sort of strategies from those of their adult counterparts, relating to coping strategies, and in relating to or regarding coping strategies in particular. There has also been drive-in research surrounding, for example, more in around sort of the psychology construct, in as far as where those from psychology psychology backgrounds, for example, have delved into, have looked to investigate, at least more so in line to sort of quality of life or QOL type research, in addition to psychosocial aspects. And then it's only in sort of more recent literature that or more recent evidence that has looked to actually interlink aspects, in context of young people, at least, in context of in around young people, at least, and looking at aspects of the immune system and neurobiological systems to better understand mechanistics surrounding coping strategies. And so, although the research has endeavored to sort of join systems, the range of phenomena that look to that sort of link human pathophysiology and the immune system and neuroendocrine systems, for example, these systems have different interactions. So retrospective investigations suggest or sort of inform that the immune function and personality and characteristics are also associated with differences in immune function. Research surrounding coping has also scrutinized interconnections between the functions main organs of stress, and just to elaborate, or sorry, emphasize in on this, that where there's where works or literature or evidence have looked at the interconnections between the functions of main organs in around sort of an interlink between systems. It is mainly mainly has retrospectively and amongst literature focused on stress, in around the organs of stress, and not in around so much in so much as looking at in as looking into coping, because coping in amongst some aspects of evidence at least is more of it has been construed as more of a subjective sort of entity. But in context of the main organs of stress, this includes, like, for example, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal glands, the stomach and intestines, the thymus and lymph nodes, and white blood cells, for example. And through healthcare, through aspects of healthcare, and linking aspects of healthcare and illnesses. Now, evidence also suggests that coping strategies may play an important role in the way that young people, and also, for example, in amongst the adult population, although that in young people respond or react to life events. Um, Over the past decades, objective self-report coping measures, or coping surveys, for example, or coping-like surveys, or surveys or questionnaires, have been sort of the main methodology of choice. And again, some of the main investigators are those from psychology backgrounds, and not so much from other frontline clinicians, or actually from those from other allied health professionals, or AHPs, for example. So in over the past 2 decades, for example, this has meant that questionnaires or implementation of questionnaires have been the main methodology of choice for most investigators investigating aspects of stress, but also in aligned to aspects that are aligned to close to that of the coping entity. And during the 1970s and 1980s, coping research moved towards a model that primarily referred to to conscious processes. So coping is typically conceptualized as a conscious response, or a reaction, for example, to external and or stressful or negative sort of events, or scenarios. When confronted with specific challenging events, young people, the young tend to be specific relating and regarding in kinds of coping that in the kinds of coping that he or she, being young people, are likely to utilize. One additional factor mediating between coping strategies and efficacy for between coping strategies and illnesses may well be the nature of a situational stressor. So that being where particular sort of kinds of stressors sort of are then particular in context of pathophysiology that form a part of or are linked to particular situations or scenarios. So now, before going into sort of the aims and objectives, if you will, a little bit in around a look at chronic illnesses, a look at aspects of chronic illnesses. So to investigate coping inherent to particular chronic illnesses, investigators should take into consideration the amongst the many factors the nature, the length, the severity, and the symptomology of an illness itself, the diagnostic and therapeutic procedures, and a patient's character with socioeconomic elements or aspects of socioeconomic background. When, for example, a patient is a child or young people, one must also take into consideration the emotional development and the familial structure and the intrafamilial conscious and unconscious network into which a young person sort of interacts or fits with. Most chronically ill children or young people would be expected to cope adequately with daily daily stress triggers under normal circumstances. However, the recurring symptoms or symptomologies of illness or illnesses tend to lead to an abnormal situation. For example, hospitalizations and or invasive medical procedures, which may result in periodical adjustment in chronically ill populations. So the coping conceptualizations in young people suffering from illnesses are not all that divergent from coping with daily hassles in some regard and stress, etc. A theoretical conceptualization allows for the differentiation of coping efforts in young people. In literature, technical competence, for example, in coping, is also defined as an individual's immediate concern in around stress reduction. So the immediate concerns can relate to, for example, firstly, the cognitive development of an individual, i.e., or for example, a young person's ability to identify stressful events and associate stress management strategies aligned to challenges. Secondly, emotional development, where this is around a person's ability to identify feelings and personality development, i.e., for example, to elaborate on emphasize the emergence of individuals' unique coping styles. And then, in addition to this, coping competence also refers to the cognitive, emotional, and personality prerequisites a young person's bringing a young person's prerequisites a young person brings into a scenario. So, in contrast, adaptive competence reflects to a process that underlies the development of an individual's general capacities in response to situational stress. Theoretical approaches and empirical investigations have examined, for example, firstly, sort of a link between cognitive appraisal of a stressful event and coping response, and secondly, the development and contextual factors influence how an individual sort of copes with everyday stresses, and the degree to which an individual approaches an event or implements active cognitive and attitude efforts to prompt adaptive changes. So what should be understood is therefore in around with coping does not just require the sort of psychology aspect. An individual's it doesn't just require, the psychology element, but an individual's physiology or pathophysiology must be able to cope as well, i.e., for example, immunology versus the neurobiology symptoms or symptomologies. So now looking into the aims and objectives in around this. Um, so the review investigates in this research poster presentation looks into, firstly, the central mechanisms in young people and chronic illness, and secondly, how an understanding of mechanistic can help raise awareness and encourage educational perspectives. And the review the this work also this post presentation also looks to understand how bettering the lives of young people with chronic illnesses can be achieved pertaining to PPI or patient and public involvement initiatives, and the aims encourage sort of an approach that focuses on or focus on a united responsibility. So now going into a more specifically in purporting to coping immunology and neurobiology. So at the turn of the millennia, turn of the millennia, investigators had informed that specific modes of interpreting are variable, and these sort of result in young person or young people adapting different coping strategies. So, for instance, it may be that emotional focused coping emotion focused coping regarding loss, for example, ultimately increases the probability of anxiety for feelings through isolation, because a young person may be less emotionally equipped to reach out, and this often also leads to withdrawal. One of the fathers of stress of in specifically around stress research was Dr. Hans Selye, who was a clinical endocrinologist and an experimental biologist who focused their efforts on exhaustive stress. Studying studying coping in young people with chronic illness or illnesses can also enable investigators to understand stress aligned to laboratory medicine. It is important to note that the manifestations uh, manifestations of extreme stress, for example, frequent and severe symptoms, are not inevitable. Stress is a consequence of the interaction between a sort of a stress trigger, and external and internal conditioning factors. Hence, young people may avoid or limit stress-related symptoms or symptomologies by strengthening conditioning factors and building on resources. Strengthening coping resources in young people should alter the perception of self and the environment. Um, uh, and the environment, and thereby reduce the sort of feelings of threat, and minimize or avoiding a subsequent pathophysiological stress responses. Now, in around this, additionally, and again, where some of the context may be familiar to those who have listened in on some of the research poster presentations, and where in on this table, or table one, which highlights sort of the coping and stress models and theories. So in around this, there is in this table, or this or tabulated information, there is the sort of name of varying different investigators over the number of years since in around the studying and investigations, sort of early investigations in around stress and aspects of coping, since 19 from as far back or retrospective from 1929 up to the sort of current, up to at least sort of in around in around nine in around the up to close to the new millennia in around the year 2000. So, for example, investigators Walter Cannon looked at the fight or flight theory and model. Then there was Hans Selye in around the general adaptation syndrome in around 1936. Then there was Moose and Solomon, who looked at emotion, stress, and the central nervous system and immunity in between 1964 and 1969. Then there was Richard Lazarus, who looked at harm, threat, and challenge in around 1966. Then there was George Engel, who looked at the biopsychosocial model and theory in around 1977, and then there was Susan Folkman, who looked at positive emotions from 1980, 1985, and 1997, and then from the new sort of from in around the sort of new millennia and onwards, there have been a sort of a way sort of where varying different investigators have looked at how aspects of psychology, but also the immune system are interlinked. For example, and so this was where in amongst the literature there have been terminologies such as the psychoneuroimmunology concept, or the PNI concept, which had been a basis from the new millennia around the year 2000 and onwards. And then there was also where investigators also have had looked at a theory or a basis in around a diathesis stress model, and all of these different sort of investigators or investigators and forms are then linked to where, for example, they're specific or particular to physiological and or psychological. And then in this table, there is some citations where some of the literature and evidence can be sourced or resourced from. So this tabulated information is looking at sort of the theories and models and the of coping and stress, and ultimately informs of different sort of stress theories and models, as well as coping, in addition to coping according to those the two main paradigms being physiological and psychological perspectives. And then in on this research poster presentation, I look at some of the coping elements on the experimental immune function. So whether there is a means of habituation, whether there is a means of habituation is important, since this determines whether there is a coping response. Health professionals cannot just look at the events themselves and make assumptions about the environment and whether this prompts a stressful nature. Clinical anxiety, for example, is associated with increased circulating neutrophils and fewer natural killer cells or NK cells, T and B lymphocytes, which are in amongst literature are referred to as white cells, and T helper and suppressor cytotoxic T cells. Anxiety is also associated with reduced natural killer cell NK cell activity and lymphoproliferative responses to mitogen or cell division. Mitogen being terminology to refer to as how different cell types are differentiated or divided within pathophysiology. And in addition to how also certain cell types are stimulated in amongst cell and cell forms. In one investigation, psychological strain was induced in confronting human volunteers confronting human volunteers with a semi-realistic, ambiguous, and potentially uncontrollable interpersonal situation. 50 male subjects with where 50 male subjects in the age between 24 and 55 years were subjected to a mild and potentially uncontrollable interpersonal stress situation. Participants were asked to solve complex a complex sort of a complex puzzle or a complex puzzle or investigation, and subsequently participants were also requested to explain the solution the solution that was the solution they used to they used and where they were requested or invited to uh, to uh, explain the solution to each other. And the experimental situation induced a mild psychological strain, as documented by mood changes in the experimental group when compared with the control group of in around 36 male subjects or participants. And peripheral blood was also drawn by an indwelling by the use of an indwelling catheter just before, directly after, and 15 minutes after, and 13 minutes after the stress situations. And investigators have found that the number of leukocytes or lymphocytes and monocytes, T subsets and natural killer cells or NK cells and B cells were were investigated, and also where the number of cell forms, or sorry, the number of the number of cell of these particular cell types were determined. And control subjects were assigned to a neutral and relaxing condition, to the control to control the effects of blood sampling procedure. So in this study and this investigation, the investigators ultimately concluded that the effects of a short lasting and psychological stressor a psychological stressor are mainly restricted to the cells of the NK or natural killer cell or NK cell population. Stress investigations indicated that epinephrine plasma concentration is inversely related to specific immune functions of lymphocytes and monocytes. In other investigations at cellular level, stressed and anxious participants had an overall increase in leukocytes and high numbers of circulating neutrophils. There are plausible explanations of how coping, therefore, may influence the immune system and the immune and sort of immune system mediated disease or conditions. And there are consistent and convincing reports also of links between psychological stress and disease onset and progression. Several investigations had also looked at the effects of experimental psychology and physiological coping on the immune function. Research surrounding this is still progressing or has been sort of advancing. Investigations surrounding pathophysiological stress, such as pathogens and toxins, and psychological stressors such as major life events, for example, i.e., chronic illness or chronic illnesses, trauma, abuse, and or related factors related to the environment in amongst different environs, and how these are also determined by the way an individual perceives a situation or a scenario. So the conclusion around this research poster presentation is that there have been considerable theoretical and practical intrigues over the past 2 decades. A body of research also suggests that coping strategies have a mediating role in the way that an individual responds to challenges and or harmful durations or scenarios. Having referred to the literature, in vitro studies using, for example, interleukin 15 interleukin 2, interleukin 15 receptor alpha, and sort of and also a sort of stress cellular adhesion molecules, or CAMs, and NK cell natural killer cells should be experimented or further investigated with that of chemokine receptors such as CCR5, CCR7, and CXCR3 in a T cell culture system to understand if immunology and neurobiology is affected in young people with chronic illnesses, in amongst chronic illness or chronic illness populations. In on this research poster presentation, there are a few references or citations which listeners can look to resource to read in on related works. That is the end of this research poster outline. This research poster outline, which was a collaborative between two academic institutions, and also as part of a collaboration with the RPSG, and KDOS social media platforms.